and welcome. My name is Christy Vallier, and I'm an assistant professor of architecture and the chair of this semester's Knowlton School of Architecture's Baumer Lecture Series. And tonight is the second lecture in the series entitled Doubling. Doubling has multiple meanings, or at least a double meaning, within the context of this lecture series. It literally describes more of something, or a double dose. Additional meanings include having a close resemblance, to serve in two roles, and it has a slightly mischievous tone, as in to double as something you are not, or an adventurous implication, such as a stunt double. It is ambiguous and specific, depending on what comes to mind first. This oscillation between design ambiguities is definitely at play in the work of our lecturer tonight. Tonight, it is my pleasure to introduce the artist, Ann Hamilton, a provocative, prolific, and influential artist that has been revealing new territory and challenging our spatial boundaries throughout her career. The work evokes lingering contemplations and has significantly stunned and impacted the discourse of contemporary art. Likely many of you in this room know Ann well, as she has served on the faculty of The Ohio State University since 2001, where she's a distinguished university professor in the Department of Art. However, as someone who is relatively new to this city, she has seemed like an ambassador, hosting open dinners at her German Village studio that foster cross-disciplinary discussions and welcome international guests. She has a genuine interest in the delightful contamination of norms and the distortion of expectation. For all of these reasons, and many more, I am pleased to have her in the lineup here at Knowlton tonight. For a bit of context for everyone else, Ann was born in Ohio and has received a BFA in textile design from the University of Kansas and an MFA in sculpture from the Yale School of Arts. Ann has received many honors, including the MacArthur Fellowship, the United States Artist Fellowship, the NEA Visual Arts Fellowship, and has been the recipient of the Heinz Award. And her work has been exhibited extensively around the world. Her major museum installations include the Park Avenue Armory, the Pulitzer Foundation for the Arts, the Guggenheim Museum, the Hirshhorn Museum, the Museum of Modern Art, and this is to name only a few. Fortunately, we can see her work much closer to home, as a public art project is within the Thompson Library in the reading room, entitled Verse. I encourage you all to visit this if you have not already. And in closing, my first encounter with Ann's work was via the catalog from the show entitled White Cloth in 1997, the subtle but striking series of billowing white curtains and the gauzy framed views beckoned that I take a closer look. And the priority placed on reframing and the engagement of the spatial realm have continued to bring me back to Ann's work over and over, even as it has developed to include other mediums of modifying space. Please help me welcome tonight, Ann Hamilton.
Can you hear me now? How's that? Yeah, okay, all right. Just waiting for that. Maybe my relationship to doubling is that I love accretion, and I think that like whenever I'm at the flea market, if ever there is one and there's another like it next to it, I must have both of them. And if there's two and then there's four, then I need more for it. So I have been a materially accumulative person, but no two things are ever actually alike. And I think maybe that love of accretion and those processes with material really starts with my first hand, which is a textile hand. And so I grew up with things in my lap, making things, sewing under and over, thinking about all of the metaphors of cloth, something which reveals and conceals, something that covers, we sleep between sheets, thinking about all of the material processes that form the membranes that most intimately always surround our bodies. And I think that that training in textiles, which started really at my grandmother's side, I think being read to in knitting or being read to and needlepointing, the liquidity of those rhythmic processes were always intimately woven. And it's only really in retrospect that one is maybe, it's apparent to one how important and how central some of those early experiences are and have been. And so as I've kind of gone forward from the scale of working on the loom or working on the lap, the processes of thread and of two threads crossing which make a cloth, the loop of knitting, the recto and the verses, the up and verso or the up and the down, the in and the out, the front and the back, all of those very fundamental relationships of cloth continue to really, I think, inform my own material processes. And so as I was preparing to be here today, I was thinking about how I might even begin to address my relationship to architecture. Perhaps because my first hand is a textile hand, that means it's closest at the scale of the body. And the first projects I made literally made animate surfaces of it. So this is a very early piece. You can tell by the color of my hair. And here that takes a man's suit and it is encrusted with black painted toothpicks. They become like a protective quill-like surface. And when I stand, I'm not camouflage, I'm actually exposed. And this kind of contradiction and paradox of that was something at the time I was really interested in. But I was thinking about how clothing and cloth and its structure is the first architecture of the body. And so how in some ways does that textile hand extend to architecture? And so when I was in graduate school, there was a quite literal step between this suit in which the animate and inanimate, the inanimate toothpicks perhaps became animate as I wore them and as I responded to my breath and just the movement of one's body breathing became then the surround for the body, and so was applied quite literally to the architecture, to the space in which I was working. And this is an image from my studio when I was in graduate school. And so the textile or the tactile surface that had been this coat was now the landscape within which the body sat. And actually, when I did this piece, it's sort of interesting to note that I needed a ladder to get up there, and then the ladder was taken away, and then someone shut the door. And so, part of making work is also making physical predicaments for one. And whether that's for oneself as a maker or for someone who might come in to make the work. And architecture has given me form and given me a predicament in many cases. And so as I thought about how does the hand touch, extend to touch it, quite literally coding it as I did these early textiles initially, I was thinking about how when it gives me form. So it's in some ways I feel like I am the goldfish in the bowl, and when I have a very large space the architectures that I have to say actually changed my life, not only changed the city, and has had, as you all know, tremendous influence in conversation and in writing and in the discussion around architectural space and process, is the building of the Wexner, the Peter Eisenman building. And this, I was invited to do a project, and I was at the time living in California. When I had graduated from high school, I think I had said, I'm never moving back, I'm never coming back, or I'm never moving back to Ohio. Never say never, as they say. And I was asked by the curator, Sarah Rogers, to make a project in a new building that was just opening. And I really knew very little about it. And as a consequence of actually working in this building, I decided to move back to this. And so, you never know the way in which an architecture might change your life. And I have been here ever since. So this is in the early 90s. And when we were invited, many of you might know that this building was pretty much open without an exhibition, with a few media pieces and performance works when it first opened. And then there were a series of projects that were invited into its space. And that project is not one I've actually really thought about in a really long time, but it was one in which thinking about the grid structure and the intersection of the two grids that form the space, the interior space and the intersections of the materials in here, I started thinking about this as a land grant university and the gridding of the landscape, and to think about how I might in some way invest this with something that had perhaps another kind of order. And so you can see how literally textile-like these early projects are. It's cornmeal on the floor and the corn husks from the exterior wall surrounded in this large structure, which is like a kind of like a giant bassinet. There is meal that is growing and cultivating a culture of moths. And so, although few institutions are really excited about inviting insects into their domain, this project called Dominion actually was cultivating and raising these moths with the help of the entomology department. They were feeding off the contents of the room, which obviously there was a lot to eat. And at the far end, there was a person who sat, in fact, at one point it was my mother who was helping with this project. And they were unraveling the grid of the block. But there was this impossible Sisyphean distance between the narrow, slender convergence of the space, there where the figure sat, and the gigantic bassinet at the other end. And so this activity of the unraveling never met the cultivation and the sort of life cycles of the moths. But I do know that after this project was over and taken down, that for many, many months, that in the theater pieces, when the lights would go down and there would have a single light, you would see those moths all through. And that is partly, I was interested in something that in fact might not be able to be contained by the structure, the enclosing structure of the grid. And I was trying to work with that in these two different scales. Shortly after that, really in a similar time period, I was asked to do a large project at the Henry Art Museum, which is also a university art museum of a very different architectural character than the Wexner, that's at the University of Washington. And I was really thrilled by the invitation because unlike the project at the Wexner, which was in a sequence of galleries, and so the experience of it was like it was a separate room. The possibility of this invitation was to work with the whole building. And so this is the original more Beaux-Arts building, and they were getting ready to renovate it. And so because of that renovation, I was able to kind kind of go at it in terms of the surfaces. And so we took down all of the artificial lights, and they were willing to turn off all the fire alarms while we worked. And normally the glass ceiling is covered up because mostly they're trying to protect the works of art from light. So one of the first gestures here was to open the building to light, and that's something that has consistently been one of the first, acts that I have done in the work. When in any circumstance, I'm looking for the light, I'm looking for the window, I'm always turning towards it or orienting the work towards where it might be. And in this case, that method, this piece really changed as the season went on. It was winter in Seattle, and it was at times, it grew dark very early in the afternoon. And this became a landscape of soot marks, because what we did was we literally touched every square inch of the building, which is, that textile, tactile part of me. And this was all done with the soot from candles that traced the wall, with many, many different people helping it. So it became a kind of landscape of these marks. And then underfoot, there were metal numbered tags. And so these are tags that are used to actually flag trees in the forestry industry. And those were underfoot. So when you walked in, you heard the sound of your own footsteps differently through that material. You perhaps smelled some of the soot, but more importantly, there were 200 free-flying canaries in this space. And I was kind of thinking about the history of this architecture and the natural, its familiarity for me through the natural history museums and these places where something that was once alive is now removed from its living context and is in a completely different state. And I was thinking about how do we animate, how do I return air, how is this made animate in another way? And so although those little canaries are very difficult to photograph, you can see they did collect themselves in the only object in this room, which was a large vitrine that was filled with wax ex-votive heads that I had first picked up when I was working in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, just previous to this project, and which we passed there. And I think the photographer here has coaxed them with a little food, which you see on the surface. But what happens is that when you walk in this space, you're also very aware that it's not your space. And so your behavior, I think, is modified by that awareness that you are the species with weight, and you're surrounded, and this has been given over to the species who can be weightless. And it was really, for me, a door opener in many ways in my practice to be able to work in the whole space and to think about how the experience of being in there, which unfolds not as a single thing you're looking at, but in your body as you walk across the space. That really changed my thinking about how I might interact with the spaces I was working with. These are just a few of the process shots. One of the things, especially in this early work that you can see materially, is that every kind of gesture, literally of material making, is transparently present in the film that it becomes. And it carries all of the different hands and the rhythm of those different hands doing a very similar task. And it can be very easy, I think, in some ways to talk about that in terms of like a quilting bee or those kinds of social stitching patterns. But I do think that it's from the textiles that my love of the sociability of this process comes. And also this, an understanding of the way in which the project needs all these different hands. If it was one hand, smoke working on walls, it would have not had the rhythm. And that there's something that comes out of this collective. So the structuring of many of these works are between the singular gesture and a more collective one. And also, I've worked in very different scales. So at the same time, I was invited to do a project at the Carnegie International in the north side of Pittsburgh. They were partnering with the Mattress Factory all soot-licked. There were, I think, 30 canaries, big lions. Some of them marked the smoke-licked walls with their wings. And that, obviously, the surface obscured the view. And at the top, this is where they tended to gather, partly that it was also very warm. And there you can see, so this active process was put into this building. And to see this piece, you had to get a key from the mattress factory. And you could bring it over and you could walk into the house yourself, alone. And the condition of that, in some ways, has forever spoiled me. There was something about that you kind of found it on your own. And the mattress factory is one of our regional treasures. And I think they continue to try to make opportunities for artists to work with very different conditions and how those conditions allow different kind of work to be made. But so I wanted to just show these two because they're very different scales, but they're very similar materials. And after that, I think it really changed how I thought about, or maybe my own necessity to touch every square inch as I began to work in different scales. And the social circumstances of the art sketches brought on different kinds of questions. This project is at the Aldrich Museum, which is a small house museum that's outside of New York City, and was originally purchased to show contemporary painting outside of New York by Larry Aldrich. And when he did that, this is a building that had been a bank and a post office and a general store and had a religious history. It had many, many functions, and it was an old wooden structure. But he covered up all the windows, so there's a lot of windows in this. And I remember walking around and thinking that the first gesture is to open all of the windows to light. And so what we did was make a piece in which the sheetrock was torn off and the light was returned to the interior. And then, because I had the whole house, we put a cable system up that went through the ceiling and the walls and the floor, but not where any of the thresholds were, went up to the attic. And that cable system carried two white cloths that never quite saw each other. And so they were following and leading, and you were held between the motion of these two cloths as you walked through this space, where there were many other objects installed as part of the project. I'm not really going to go into it. But the structure of the piece was such that the movement of the sort of electromechanical system of these cloths was not responsive to light, but there was a sound piece and there was a table that was responsive to other elements. So the air was literally brought in from the exterior, came up through the legs of these tables, and it was like a kind of foosball table. So it had tiny little air holes, and it was funneling the cold air, and it held a cloth aloft. So in some ways, this building was haunted, but it was haunted by the apparition of these white cloths, and all of those were tied to some element of the exterior. So there was a relationship between the interior and the exterior in their materiality of the objects. And then I was also, because it was a wooden building, they were very open to my not only cutting some, I think, 42 holes for the cloth to pass through. It was a ghost-like piece. This is the piece that Christy referred to in the introduction. But we were also able to cut an 8-foot floor, an 8-foot hole in the floor of the front room, and there install another wooden floor that would spin. And so when you stepped on it, it was just fast enough to be a dare, but you went from moving around the room to the room really in some ways moving around you. And I was interested in that inversion. I was interested in being physically taken up and the kind of physical absorption and ecstasy, perhaps, in relationship to a small object that was on the wall, which was a mirrored color, which was the self-consciousness of one's image and its reflection. And so begin a project, I always begin by just walking around in circles. Really, I try to arrive in many ways blank and without expectation, and to try to respond to the kinds of things that come to mind as I'm there. And that is often, it may be, what's going on internationally in the newspaper. It may be in part, and how that changes how you arrive at the building you're visiting. It's the social history, the foreign history. And so probably one of the most complicated honors that I've had is to represent the U.S. at the Venice Biennial, and to greet this building, I suppose, with the project. And so my first gesture with this was to open all of the skylights again to light. So the symmetrical galleries, with two off of each side of the entrance, were now filled with natural light. But as I visited, I also went straight, I came home and I went straight to Monticello. It seemed to me that this was, the form is embedded in ideas of institutional authority and the American democracy, and how that's embedded into this architecture at the same time that it looks like every bank in Iowa or in the Midwest. And so, and the scale of that, it's actually quite an intimate building, and it has a small rotunda as you enter it. It was built in, I think, 1933. And at the same time, Charles Resnicoff, who was writing these two volumes, Testimony 1 and 2, a recitative, on the history of violence and property violence and racial violence in the U.S. And it's this incredible book written in the 30s about history at the turn of the century. And the project in Venice was occurring in 1999, just as the century was being turned. And so I was thinking about how is a culture really haunted by all the difficult parts of its past, which had to really be fully engaged in its political rhetoric. And so I wanted to do something with this building that would kind of destabilize some of it visually. My first proposal was to leave the pediment, to leave all of the roof structure, to take all of this down and have it be an open pavilion. Obviously, that was not something that was going to work. And so I tried to figure out how to work with it. I mean, and how to think about that sort of destabilization. So we built a glass wall in front of it, and that was a grid through which if you were standing across the Giardini, you saw through to the interior courtyard, which that wall created, and the presence of the only object. And this is kind of what it looked like through the glass. And then inside, there were really no objects. What we did was insert a auger system, and that turned around the perimeter of each of the galleries, and it spilled out this intense fuchsia powder that fell over a Braille translation of the Resnicoff text. And so I was thinking about the relationship between what is told and what is not told, what is on the pediment and what is silent. And it's a project in which, in some ways, the building was leaking, it was bleeding, this material was traipsing itself all over Venice. It was on and off the Vaccarettos, and it was found in distances quite far. And that kind of leakage is really similar to the wax kind of melting through the building that I first showed you in the Carnegie project. And here you can see just the way that the skylights were open. Right after we inserted this system into the building, it was put on the historic register. It was really a good thing it wasn't before we did it. There was a lot of work we had to do to get the system to connect around each of these, and this is just showing you the powder. The powder, just a note on that, was so fine that it was off, and it was a plastic micro bead that was almost kind of smoke-like, but obviously very pleasant in its color. And the color looks perhaps like red, maybe the association is obviously for many people to blood, but it was really more fuchsia and more artificial. And I was just thinking a lot about how then, and increasingly now, so much of our daily lives, our personal lives, how we're affected by things that are invisible. But that project is a whole lecture in and of itself. But before I move from it, I just want to say that there was a recording in here, and the recording of a voice in phonetic code reading out Lincoln's second inaugural address. And if you followed that voice around the perimeter of this space, you actually could, and you could spell out the address. And it was that aspect of this project was really important to me because it made me realize how much all the reading and the research that goes into projects is one of the studios of the project. And to begin to push it was a question about what happens when we read become the material of the work, that when we read, it's often silent. We're connected to something that is in our lap, like the clock. It's close at hand, but it's connecting us to something far away. And those near-far relations are ones that are now having a lot of influence in the way that I'm approaching these spaces and working with them. Most immediately after this project, I worked in an amazing, wonderful building in Sweden, in Baumer, which is about an hour and a half north of Malmö, on an estate called Baumer. And in one of the barn buildings that's just to the side of this image, this is the original castle that was the first part of it was built sometime in the 1500s. And this barn building was built in the late 1800s. And it had recently been converted, not from a storage space, into a project for artists. And the family who has been a steward of this property and the generation that's taking care of it opened the landscape, they started the sculpture park, they've made the private land public, and this was part of that project. So I was invited by Charles and Marita Bachmeister to have, initially they said, Anne, would you like to have one floor of this barn for a project in the summer? And I think I hesitated for 2 seconds because I love this building in so many ways. And so they said, well, would you like the whole thing? And so I was very interested in that because of obviously the opportunity of having 5 stories and to make a piece that unfolded across send the building. It's the color change, that they're not properly in the barn, but they're glass panes. And we put gels on those so that each layer of the chroma color changes and it grows to be more pink or more red. And that's a very subtle thing as you then send into the space. It grows darker because of the roof structure. And the materials that started underfoot ascend your body. So there was the floor, and then there are the tables that you just saw, and then there all of the structural posts are threaded as if it's a warp preparing for weaving. But what's weaving back and forth and crossing those horizontal threads is this voice. So it's a form of weaving, but it is at the scale of the architecture, and it's with sound. And here's an image of that. And then that horizon level ascends up, and the materiality on the top floor is in clothing that is obviously a reference to the bodies that are absent, that once made the history of this building, and they are overhead in the rafters. So you can see, like with that project, and now maybe when I show you this one, that I'm starting to get a taste for very large spaces. And, but I'm not necessarily placing objects in them. And so I think one of my questions is, like, what is already here? How do I engage that? And what is the kind of presence that comes from the materiality that I can bring to touching it? And in this project, this is a double-story space at Massimoca. And in it, we installed, I think, 42 or 50 mechanisms that individually drop single sheets of paper from the ceiling. And there is a system that raises and lowers speakers that there are 36 of them, or 26 of them, and each one has a different voice, but from a recording that was made collectively. And the papers fell and they accumulated. As you walk through the space, you can see that the panes have all been shifted, but it's not a gel, it's actually silk fabric of different colors. And so because the color is created by the weave of the fabric rather than the gel, depending on where you stand in relation to it, it's more highly chroma or transparent. And that's something that you notice as you turn in the space. And so in this project, I think one of the things that I learned and that it really taught me is that it's the way the elements and the sound and the light turn you towards them, and that you are actually the figure of the work, and that the work is that experience in some way that's creating not on the architecture but in you. And for me, that recognition has then gone on to have consequence for how to approach other spaces. This just has a little bit, I think, of the mechanism. Another little sound. They're air. They were all mechanisms that were powered by air. And each piece of paper obviously fell differently than any other piece of paper. And I'm interested in it's that sort of like the knitted structure, light but not light, repetition but no repetition, and how to bring that to a volume of this former factory space, which had manufactured textiles, dyed textiles actually, and manufactured capacitors, so mechanism or elements that store a charge. And you can sort of see, this is it in a more empty state. And so how did you make a space that you can be in? Judge on longing for collective experience, and the relationship of that longing I think, in my work and in my thinking to textiles. That a textile structure needs all the individual threads to become the whole cloth. And so as I worked on this, I began to think about not just the gathering of the voices that raise and lower and actually create an aisleway down the middle of the space, but how people might actually be together vocally, but not in a face-to-face relationship as you would have in an audience. The sort of scale of that very large space was at the back framed or terminated in this room, which was very dark and where we opened only one window. And when you walked in, I have a little video of this. No, I don't. The speakers in the ceiling, rather than raising and lowering, ascending or descending, were spinning around you. So you went from being turned by the voice to standing under it. And then in the next space upstairs, there was a rotating video. And so in this piece, it was a recognition that all of these motions are really the material substance of the room. Oh, here. This is out of order. But as an artist, I feel very lucky to be asked to work in these spaces that had former uses. The museum, in many ways, is the very hardest space for me to work with. And maybe we can talk about that in the questions and answers. This is the recording that you hear. There's an individual, different voice on each of the spinning speakers. It's from a project, performance piece I did with Mary. And so in this also, I started to, for the first time, use the word landscape and recognize that maybe these projects, although they are inside, that I'm dividing them. I'm making a horizon, I'm making relationships between above and below. And so the bisecting of the piece of the architecture with the cloth or the material I'm using becomes a landscape within which you walk. And in this case, within which the five peacocks walked who lived in this space. This was in Lyon. It was in a new Renzo space. And I had 2 floors of the building. And I'm only showing you the top floor, but it had this extraordinary, you can see it here, ceiling. And we took down all of the temporary walls, which tend to get built in these large open spaces, and opened all of the louvers in the skylight, and we put sound up there. So sound is inflated, and voice is in relationship to light. And underneath it, an orange silk cloth was lifted and lowered to catch the air. So the horizon that bisected is moving. And there's a single telephone pole that is wedged between the floor and that ceiling. And a person who sits on it, and they're pulling each typewriter ribbon up from the floor below. And so they're using their hand like a loom. Their fingers are like the warp, and the typewriter ribbon is like the weft. And these are then weaving or making palm-shaped, hand-shaped inked pieces that leave a trace, and which was accumulated on the floor and where the peacocks tended to like to sleep. But again, I was able to connect. It's a very literal connection, but with that little ink pot and the typewriter ribbon, this material that's obviously passed way out of material currency, but carries the possibility and the transmission of language, connected the light to the space below. And, I realized when I was organizing these slides, these images last night and today, how many horizon lines there are in the project, and that we orient ourselves to the horizon, that our sense of our right and our left, the felt sense of that is, how we quadrant things. And it's very much how I've done the first act often is to do something like that, whether it's opening the skylight, or opening a window, or in this case, taking a shut-off window and removing the floor. It's to kind of get back to the bare structure. And we suspended within it upside-down ocean, which is a horizon of charcoal, so it's wood without water that becomes water overhead. And has a lot. This had a lot to do for me with the fact that I live in Columbus, Ohio, and the pilot of the Enola Gay is from Columbus, Ohio. And thinking about the way in which that history haunts and inhabits, obviously, the relationship between Japan and America and this space where I was working, which actually housed torpedoes that were loaded onto warships. So there's always some sort of, in the materiality, some narrative of some of the social history that I'm responding to. Although I don't think of myself as a builder, I think of myself as a maker, and use that word and interested in all the possibilities of what it means to make by hand, and what is this question about what does it mean to make by hand when we live at a time of such technological extension, and what is necessary about that. I had my first opportunity to perhaps build something, and I worked with Steve Oliver, who is really a philanthropist in San Francisco, and whom I know because I borrowed 3 sheep from him for another project. And found out that he wasn't just a guy with a 4-H project that went abroad, that grew. And Steve is a builder in San Francisco, and because of that, I realized I could do a project that was very different from any other circumstance. I had come from doing several projects with dancers and performers on the stage and thinking about the face-to-face relationship of the audience to the performer, the condition of the proceeding. And so as I walked for 12 years this property trying to come up with something, because although the interiors of these pieces might be landscapes, I don't think of my work in the landscapes. And so I needed to make an interior that was also an exterior. And so here we made a tower. It's almost 8 feet. It's cast in place, and it's for commissioning performances. And it's structured so that rather than a face-to-face relation, the performer might be on one staircase and the double helix and the audience on the other. And so they're spatially round rather than face-to-face. And I have a few little small clips. It sits in a low place in the land and it rises to meet the trees. As you walk up it has window light slots that offer some flavors later. This is Meredith. I wanted to say one thing about being able to build this is that we were able to make all the decisions on site. And we decided not to do anything by fax, email, or phone. That we had to physically be standing there. And the consequence of that was that I realized the doors that we were going to put at the bottom needed to not be there. And that, in fact, you needed to enter sideways through the window. And that allowed us to return the contour of the land to its original form. And it meant that without conventional thresholds, you enter horizontally mid-place in the stairs. And one of the qualities of the stairs, because it's turning and it's slightly irregular, is that each step is just slightly shorter and it's just as really wide as the step before it. So what that means is that as you go up, they're almost 6 feet at the bottom and they're 2 feet at the top. So as you ascend towards light, you're actually video, actually, I'm sorry, that had the people entering, but best part for me is watching the audience and the performers drawing like that. And I'm still figuring out what project I need to do in it that really takes advantage of that and doesn't just assume it as a performance space. At the same time that I was working on that vertical piece, and perhaps the phosphorus of cast into this concrete tower in building in the 2007, I think it was open. I was also working under very, very different circumstances in the Long Long Laos, and we were building a boat. So the horizontal version of that actually staged is this boat. It is now on the Mekong and was made for walking meditation and was a response in many ways to the disappearance of silence in this community, and particularly the Buddhist community, where the pressures and the growing economy is writing so fastly during this 5-year period that I was in and out of there. Had a lot of influence on the Sangha and on their ability for the schools and teaching to go forward. And so we made this boat. And I wanted to make something that was really from the vocabulary of the vernacular forms there. The boats that we saw in the Mekong, the larger ones, it's a steel keel. And yes, the structure of this is really taken very directly from walking meditation temples that we found, one restored and several disused in the landscape on the river that's the opposite from along the sea. And we wanted to make this and then gift it to the community. It was 3 years, I think, in building, but it was a whole nother maybe year or two in figuring out how to give it away. And the lessons of one culture coming in with one set of understanding about what a gift is and what that exchange means, meeting another. And so in the end, when it was gifted and it was blessed, and I have, I think, some pictures actually. This is some of the blessing. I had a legal document from New York in the Fight in the Land project that I was working with that was maybe 15 or 20 pages thick. And in exchange, I had a single document, piece of paper with a seal on it. And the monk who was in charge of this monastery and teaching and reviving really the tradition of walking meditation in the culture, he said, gift is no gift, it's conditions. And so it wasn't until he understood that it was could be used for anything that it could be received. And then it was very much theirs, and I had to borrow it back for the last evening that we had in the Mekong, because for the whole project I wanted really to tether this boat of silence and the rhythm of walking to a boat of sound. And so there were several court musicians whose music had actually been suppressed under the communist government, and much of their, obviously the court music was not something that was allowed to be played. And so this music is told by the boat, and at sunset, that was our farewell. And so for all the building of projects, or all the many years and the conversations and the Skypes and the faxes and the help from Columbus here, to the moths and the creatures that are weightless. And so I was back into the pigeons, or two birds. So why reach pigeons? Is in some ways how this project started. Why train them for several months in a barn in Ohio to respond to the sound of the school bell when it's time to eat? You can see they're not, none of them are going in, as you can see. They got a little better, but then they were all mailed to New York City. It's an interesting thing that FedEx cannot receive live animals, that they actually transport them, but they're not allowed to do paperwork. So the U.S. Post actually ships birds. And the man that we worked with here in Ohio actually sells pigeons to Mike Tyson and all sorts of people who really a lot from and here they are getting into getting set, getting over to the next new shot. And this project is called the Event of the Thread. So that phrase actually comes from something that Annie Albers said, who was head of the textiles at the Bauhaus, that every cloth is the event of a thread crossing. And so touch is two things crossing as cloth is also made, just as body touch and space. And so that became the title for this project, and it was in the Park Avenue Armory, which is the side of the city block in New York. And it goes between Park Avenue and Lexington, 66 and 67. And I did what I always do when I start a project, is that I walked the space, very aware of all of the civic history that was held in this space, the drill hall, the civic regiment, the history of the militia, the history of race, of fundraisers, the welcoming and cleanup of the village to America, and thought a lot about I wanted to find a way to read to New York City, and the intimacy of reading in a very giant space, and realized that I'm not going to read to New York City and get on the radio or something, right? But the pigeons were perhaps my vehicle. And so this is the front of the building, and the drill halls where I worked. And because of the iron structure, it had an incredible ceiling that I could tie a piece to. And I realized that this was not a project, a space. It's huge. It could be engaged really with objects. It needed to carry forward the motions that I had been working with. And so I had a very strong reaction or response, I suppose, as I had many visits walking this space to understanding that if we sort of steel trusses, that the whole piece could be in suspension. And that when your body is in suspension or occupies a swing, that your sense of time changes, and that you perhaps fall open to the experience of being there and your expectation of joy. So what we did was we made a system in which there were 42 swings, because that was just the way that was how many could safely fit within the space. They're wide enough that two and even three small people could sit on one swing. And each of those swings is tied to one of the structures overhead, the iron trusses. But off of it comes a rope that goes through a set of pulleys and ties, and it actually suspends the giant cloth that you see right here in front of you. So the white cloth is held collectively by these lines that come from all of the swings. And here you can get a little bit of sense of that structure. And so the cloth itself is just a representation. You can actually tell about the architecture by all the swing lines. And so its movement here you can see underneath this space underneath, which was broken edge in the middle, ended up being the place where people would sometimes lay for hours on the ground. I have to tell you, Gordon Bean came, and he was under there for an hour at the clock. And there was a strange kind of intimacy that happened also between total strangers. There were people that got engaged. There was a wedding party that came in to be photographed. But I was interested in the we instead of the us and the them, and how could I make a system that would be dynamic that would work with what this amazing or being offered and create conditions for that. And so, no matter how busy or crowded it got, the clock kind of continued to hold this rhythm of crowd, and that's what you see really in this studio. The day itself had a day, and so as it grew dark, I'll just kind of describe that a little bit. Here's a diagram of the way the clock responded depending on how the people were seeing. They were like this, or they were like that. They behaved and lifted differently. Just as all social and political systems have their challenges, this one had an engineering challenge because the ropes coming off the swings are holding an unequal amount of weight from the clock. And so keeping the swing balanced while holding the clock was something that we had to work with, tweaking in the system. When you got on the swing, you could actually sometimes feel the weight of the person very far away from you. So their weight transferred, and if there was no one on that swing, your motion swinging, it would actually swing the swing opposite. Did you know that? And I had a lot of help. And then we were there every day taking care of it. And part of that was also not just because it needed care, but because it's one way that I learned what the project team was. It's like you do all this work and it opens and you don't even know what it is. But here, the attendance, I work with City Company and Bogart's actors and a collaborative theater group in New York. Anne Bogart actually presented several works here at the Wexner, which is how I had come to know her, and we had this community project together. But here, there were always people present reading to the pigeons all day, and they were reading from concordant scrolls, and the pigeons came in the morning to the table in these cages. And Anne was very interested, and I think some of the actors were very interested in how I was reading.
It is, in a sense, a contributory cause, but not absolutely the cause.
And they're reading it from microphones, not because the pigeons are hard of hearing, but because it's also a radio.
That contrary is
so we set up a radio signal in the space, and the radios that receive that signal are carried around in individual paper bags. And so I wanted you, like the kind of bags you might have feed to the pigeons in, but I wanted to put the voice intimately in hand and not through a sound system. The reading itself from these concordant scrolls, which were made from many different texts, were also up to the textile process. But it was interesting how people paid little attention to the birds on the street, but were fascinated when they were inside, and upset sometimes. But it was interesting to watch. I think the birds also settled into the rhythm of being read to. They're like, oh, here we go then. And the two figures are improvising between each other, like spaces of reading and spaces of silence. But they're also responding to the presence of the birds. And there you can see paper bags. There were the same number the order in which that is read is made up so that the readers are really composing as they read. It's a little bit like the supplemental rep in reading, which is the line that floats through and then attaches back to the reading. Just some pictures. These are some of the books. And in the far end, and I'm almost done, there was a writer. So reading and writing bracketed is kind of stand at the center of this space. And the view of the writer was not to the space of all that activity, but through a mirror retrospectively. And in front of them, we took what is normally blocked out and for the first time made a transparent window out to like something happening. So in the history of the armory, there had never been a window into the armory itself because it had been built out of fear and for defense. And so there was a really interesting spine, the corresponding to the spine of the Knowlton School, that actually linked these objects, the pigeon, the reader, the pigeon, the swings, the clock, the writer writing letters, the street. And that went through the whole building. And then at the end of the day, here you can see the light changing. And a composition by David Lang that was composed from one of the skulls was sung each night by different vocalists. And the pigeons would go to the middle. They never quite figured out how to fly across that giant white cloth. The first time we let them go, there were none of them came back. Rebecca Robertson, the director of, she said we spent all this money to get rid of pigeons, to renovate the space. They did eventually get hungry and they all came back. But they were carried to the middle, and then as the vocalist sang a several-minute composition, and we worked with really some amazing singers because we really were in New York, we cut a record. And so the record was cut live. And the record, this is an acetate record that gives off the thread. So the title, The Event of the Thread, completed itself really in the recording. And the thread that was given off by that. And we restored, this is Jason, who worked night and day and was really dedicated to making this project with me. And he restored this lake from Parkinson. And amazing people were down here at all. And then, I know where else. Okay. That's where I want you to see the pigeons fly. So we would ring the bell. The only injuries we really had were when people were coming to teach. Also the patient was going on.
They were trained to fly just to stay like in the exact spot. He said, it's bleeding out. It's all, it's art. But he said, literally clean it up. And then we put him back on the chicken bus with us. Stole him, brought him home. So,
Are there any questions?
there are so many questions. We're just, no questions.
You want to shoot us?
So I'm curious about the rigging with
So, did you guys all hear the question just about the rigging? Who did we work with? Well, we did a lot of tests in our studio, and we did some on-site tests. I worked with Jason, who is bicycle. He builds bicycles, part of the bike co-op here. And Jason, he really figured it out. And the at the armory, it was really through the theatrical crew that was hired on to actually put it in place. And then I also worked with a really amazing man, Marty Chapman, at Perfection Electrics. And Marty's a person that when they can't get Shrek's nose to do whatever on Broadway, they call Marty electrics. And anyway, he's helped me on a lot of projects. But it's like the project I even went through really fast at the Guggenheim. You can't test it full scale. So you have to build it in place and hope to hell it works. Yeah. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's partly being really interested in motion and that how our bodies perceive and experience things. I think when I'm walking, my perception is embodied, my experience is embodied, and so I think the kinetic element of work or wanting one kind of motion or sound in relation to another, and the relationship between that led to needing to work with technologies that I don't know how to do myself. So while I think the sensibility still really comes a lot from that craft of the ordering and structuring of relationships, whether it's the net that comes from understanding cloth, but that there's the piece in the barn, there's wood, paper, string, cloth, old materials, and then it's electromechanics. And that's actually, the two are intersecting. And so, in each circumstance, it's trying to find the people that can help me do that. And, it's not always done at the opening. But I've been very lucky to work with really some amazingly inventive people. And, I think that our communication, one of the great things about working with Marty is that I know when I first started, I worked with some engineers and they wanted to know exactly what I wanted. And I'm like, I can't tell you that. It's this process of finding it. And that it needs to be a conversation back and forth. And Marty totally understands that. In fact, we mostly talk about, well, why and how should it feel like this and, our kids and all sorts of other things. And so I feel that through that conversation, I've come to the technologies that have been part of the work. But, I kind of go more towards like video and some of the sound works that need a lot more technical support. And it's just so expensive, and it's not a very fun way to spend money. And so I think, in some ways, there's also this pendulum in the work that is trying to also get back. Really, the armory is really simple. It's a really simple system, and it's old. And so, but that's also because the architecture is what it is. I'm working in another space where I wanted to tie things to the ceiling, and there's no structure to tie to. Everything is like a false soffit. There's I can't put anything to, and that's been really difficult for me. And it's turning me another way. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Okay. Thank you.
Right. I think,
And your work reflects that.
you mean like, okay, go ahead. Yeah.
But you have to be aware of that as having succumbed to the naivete when you were taught, when you began your work. So it's, I understand its history. You have to be constantly aware of the degree to which its questions are raised about its politics, not just its authenticity as a body of thought, but its politics, its psychology, sociology, its economics. So, and you don't introduce any of that in your discussion at all. You just leave it as if it's taken for granted, and we should all take it for granted.
Well, I think that partly each of those projects I could go into, some of the politics and the history of that, really specifically, if I
You talk a lot
was
about
doing
those
it in a different
issues.
way. But I think that, I mean, I can't really take that question on fully, frankly. But I think that trying to make a circumstance actually in which we are aware we're inhabiting our bodies in a particular, not in a choreographed way, but that I think that we're surrounded by a lot of technology and discourses that actually also lead us to not even trusting our own experiences. And I think that at one level what's going on in this work is that it's trying to make a space where, you know, maybe your actual experience has an authority. So, after it goes for a drink.
It's not right. Get it right out of the drink.
There was one question up there.
I got it. Thank you.
Oh,
It was good. So I'm curious about the problem of museum space in terms of creating possibilities, especially as the trend in architecture is toward making the museum itself the object and how that transformation affects your process in terms of, in contrast to like the other spaces that you spoke about.
Well, I think that, you know, partly just even, most museums and such that house collections don't have light, and they're not necessarily interested in organic changing processes. So that hasn't been an easy, you know, fit for some of the larger things. I also think that it's been incredibly difficult for me to figure out my relationship to objects, and that one of the things that museums are really, really good at is the history of objects and object relations, and the history that comes forward from those. And so, you know, I just think the circumstance, what they do really well is not necessarily what I do really well in my work. Okay, one more. Lou, do you have a question? Yeah, I mean, yeah, what is my relationship to animals and how it goes through a lot of the projects? What?
He has a cute dog.
Stella. I think that it's, that's a whole talk. But I have worked with the presence of animals in a lot of sheep, birds, moths. And I think it's partly I'm also quite interested in this space that where recognition might be possible, but language doesn't pass. And so in some ways I've wondered if the relationship, what is the mutual witnessing, is there such a thing between the two? And how complicated our relationship to all domestic animals is. And, you know, the animals that we eat, I think those are completely unresolved relations. But I think that it's more, my work doesn't so literally obviously engage those issues, but I think it engages this kind of space of desire. This space of desire perhaps to lose one's edge as a species that is always outside, the other species that you're looking at.
Can I ask you why you asked the question? I'm always more interested in the motive behind it.